Welcome back to Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. I'm Magnum and I'm here to help you get started in week 9 of your fantasy football leagues with our waiver wire recommendations. Last week was a little bit interesting. We had the bye Mageddon in week 8. It's going to continue to be somewhat interesting here. 4 teams on a bye, a bunch of injuries, all the normal whatnot, and we're here to help you through all of it on Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. Thank you for checking out our show. You can find our content wherever you get your pods and on YouTube. Find us on social media at Seize the Gap FF and on the web at seizethegapff.com. Very simple, very easy to remember, just like the flaps, FLAPS. Follow, like, and please subscribe. If you had fun, please click the thumb. And please note that we are generally going to be referencing ESPN leagues when we're talking about ownership. There are tons of different fantasy leagues, providers, platforms, all of that stuff. But just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to be referencing ESPN, generally talking about 12-team PPR leagues, and we're trying to highlight players available in the majority of leagues, so owned in 50% or less of leagues. Starting off with the head of Voltron at the quarterback position, thankfully didn't pick up any new injuries here, other than Carson Wentz being out for the season, but he had already been playing hurt for a while, and that was going to happen sooner or later, emphasis on the sooner. We do have a few quarterbacks who could be making their return in week 9, including J.J. McCarthy for the Vikings, Lamar Jackson for the Ravens, Brock Purdy for the 49ers, Kyler Murray for the Cardinals, Michael Penix Jr. for the Falcons, Bryce Young for the Panthers, and Jaden Daniels for the Commanders. Lamar Jackson is the one of note right up top because the Ravens are playing on Thursday nights, but as of when I'm recording this on Tuesday, it seems pretty certain that he is going to roll, especially after the injury report snafu in week 8 landed the Ravens in hot water. So I would fully expect Jackson to be out there this week. We have one do it now ad. This is a player who is owned in more than 50% of leagues, but less than 80. So he's out there in a surprising number of leagues. And if he is, you should go ahead, do it now. Spend a lot of fab on him, 25 to probably 35% for this guy. Veteran quarterback, Matthew Stafford of the Rams, owned in 68% of leagues. So he's out there in almost a third of leagues, 32% of leagues. Rams have a great schedule. You hope he gets Puka back. He's had to air it out here. I think that will continue. So if you're in one of those leagues where Stafford is out there, you need help at the quarterback position, go ahead, do it now, add him. Only one priority ad at the quarterback position this week. Joe Flacco of the Bengals, owned in 37% of leagues. I am pretty sure the wheels are going to fall off here at some point, but for now, he has an elite set of weapons and a bad defense, meaning he's going to be just airing it out a lot of times per game here. It's nice to see him get the running game going a little bit, but they're probably going to need 30 points to hang in most games, so I don't mind Flacco. I'm at least going to ride him till the wheels fall off. I'm not going as heavily at him as I would be at Stafford. If he's out there, I'm probably sticking to, 5 to 10% of my fab, unless you're in a 2 quarterback league, but I doubt Flacco's out there in Superflex. So, if you're in a 1 quarterback league, Flacco's the perfect quarterback by committee kind of guy, so don't overcommit with your fab bid. One speculative ad here, Sam Darnold of the Seahawks has been a surprisingly high floor quarterback this season. He's been good at all but 2 matchups while offering a bit of a ceiling. Decent upcoming schedule, only owned in 21% of leagues, so out there in 79% of leagues. Shouldn't take a big bid to get him. I think some people are a little bit skittish. I wouldn't want to rely on him as my only starter in a 1 QB league, but I certainly don't mind him as a quarterback by committee option. Should be able to get him for 5-7% of your fab, something in that range. And then we have 2 streaming options for you in week 9. Number one is cheating a little bit because he is over the threshold, but Kyler Murray is now only owned in 61% of leagues, so he's out there in 39% of leagues. The Cardinals have the matchup this week. They're traveling to Dallas to face that Cowboys defense that's given it up to just about everybody. Murray is going to get one more shot here. If he falls on his face or gets injured again, there is a chance it is Jacoby Brissett the rest of the way, so he's got a lot riding on this one. I think he should, be in a pretty good position to put up some fantasy points, whether the Cardinals win or lose here. So I like Murray as a streaming option this week if he's available in your league. And then we have Old Man Rodgers, still only owned in 42% of leagues, so out there in more than half, about 58% of leagues. The Steelers are at home once again. They're against a Colts team that's easier to throw on than run on. And if the Colts can continue to do what they've done and get a lead, that will force Rodgers to air it out. So once again, feels like I'm recommending him as a streamer every week, but for the most part, he's coming through with 2 touchdowns, 250 or so yards. So I would expect something right in that range, about 15 or so PPR points next week in week 9 if you want to go ahead and roll Rodgers against the Colts. Maybe even a little bit more ceiling here if they really have to air it out early and often. When you look at the running back scoring leaders for week 8, there were a lot of the usual suspects at the top of the charts, but there were a couple of very nice welcome surprises. And of course, a couple of unfortunate surprise injuries, as there always are. And it feels like at the running back position. Sorry, Cam Scadaboo dislocated his ankle. It was pretty gruesome. Sounds like he should make a full recovery in time for next year, but the Giants rookie running back is out for the season. Another rookie running back, Quinshawn Judkins of the Browns, suffered a shoulder injury. The Browns are on a bye this week, so we're not quite sure what his status is. We're not going to get an update on that for another week or so. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. Saquon Barkley of the Eagles picked up a groin injury. He said that he could have returned to the game if necessary. It wasn't close at that point, so he was not needed. The Eagles are also on a bye this week, so we can't be 100% sure about his week 10 status until next week. And then finally on Monday Night Football, Chiefs running back Isaiah Pacheco sprained his MCL. He is at least going to be out for week 9. They're calling him week to week, but the Chiefs are on a bye in week 10, so there is a possibility he returns in week 11, having only missed one game. We have two do it now ads. Again, guys that are owned in more than the 50% threshold, but less than 80% of ESPN leagues. We have Chargers sophomore running back Kamani Vidal, owned in 73% of leagues. So still out there in over a quarter of leagues. He's been very, very good. I expect him to still have a role if and when Omarion Hampton returns, especially if you need help at running back. I am comfortable going somewhere between half to two-thirds of my fab on Vidal if he is still out there. And then you have Woody Marks, rookie running back for the Houston Texans, owned in 73% of leagues, so out there in 37%. He is going to be a committee back. It seems like the Texans really worry about making him the featured guy, so he is going to exist in a tandem with Nick Chubb, but he's looked explosive with the ball, a good receiver going back to his USC days, so a lot to like about Woody Marks here. I am a little bit bearish on his long-term prospects as far as dynasty leagues, but in a season-long league, go ahead. If Marks is still out there, I would spend up to half of my fab that I have left on Marks if I'm looking for help at running back. We have several priority ads at the running back position this week, starting with the guy who's probably going to get the first crack at replacing Scadaboo, Tyrone Tracy Jr. of the New York Giants. Already owned in 42% of leagues, so only out there in 58%. He is going to be involved in the passing game. Former receiver, has struggled with fumbles, but in PPR leagues, I think he is going to be the guy you want to own. We'll talk about Devin Singletary in a minute. And then you have rookie running back for the Bears, Kyle Monangai, owned in 39% of leagues at this point. He looks good. I watched him run a couple of times. I'm like, man, when did DeAndre Swift get so fast? So I definitely like his prospects. Again, kind of like the Woody Marks situation. The Bears are trying to pigeonhole him as kind of a complimentary back and maybe a guy that needs to be involved in a tandem. That seems to be the way Ben Johnson likes to do business anyway, so not a huge deal. But if he is out there, I would spend probably somewhere between a third of my fab and 45% of my fab on him. He's going to be in a committee. If something happens, they would probably pair him up with Roshan Johnson, but he's also hurt right now, so I like getting some exposure to Monangai if he's still out there on the waiver wire. And then you have my guy Tajay Spears continuing to bang the drum here. Slowly but surely, he is taking over that Titans running back job. They're definitely going with a youth movement, and you can see the explosiveness. It's not a great offense, but they should be in comeback mode a lot, so there is some garbage time production that you can get here. Spears was a major factor in winning fantasy leagues last year down the stretch. Hopefully he can do the same thing, only owned in 36% of ESPN leagues. And then you probably forgot about him, but Bam Knight, Zonovan Knight of the Arizona Cardinals. They're coming off the bye. He's now only owned in 19% of leagues, so out there in 81%. He seems to be ahead of Michael Carter. It's possible they have DeMarcado back this week and he does some of the passing game work, but considering the matchup against the Cowboys, I'm okay with spending 15 to 25% of my fab on Bam Knight, taking a chance on him with a good matchup here, and then maybe having a couple weeks of usefulness until, or I should say, if and when Trey Benson returns. And then we have Isaiah Davis of the New York Jets, owned in 8% of leagues. Jets are on a bye this week, so he shouldn't cost you that much if he's still out there. You're pretty much banking on Breece Hall getting traded when you're picking him up. He has a little bit of value as a handcuff and a complement to Hall. But the main attraction here is he is pretty much all they have right now with Braylon Allen on IR if they do trade Breece Hall. So it's a very nice speculative ad. Just know that you're not going to be getting anything from him this week. And then if they keep Hall, you could very well wind up dropping him. So be careful how much fab you spend. I'm probably not going more than 10 or 15% because, again, you have to bank on Hall getting traded for this to really pay off. And then you have Devin Neal, rookie running back for the Saints. A little bit involved last week. Alvin Kamara did get banged up. Neal is only owned in 3% of leagues, so out there in 97% of leagues. He is the clear-cut handcuff now with Kendre Miller on IR, flying under the radar a little bit, so it shouldn't cost you more than 5, maybe 10% of your fab at the absolute most here. I like tucking him on the bench. I don't want to necessarily bank on a Kamara injury, but I do think the Saints are going to want to see what they have with a lot of their young players. So I expect Neal to get some burn down the stretch one way or the other. Staying at running back, you do have a couple of potentially cheap streaming options that could be multi-week options for you here. Probably best suited as RB3s or flexes. You have Samaje Perine of the Bengals, only owned in 6% of leagues, and then Devin Singletary of the Giants, only owned in 1% of leagues. They've been working Perine in more with Chase Brown over the past 2 weeks. And it's actually helped Brown, so I'm not that concerned about it if I am a Brown owner. I think P Ryan is pretty much a prayer if you're expecting anything more than 6 points or so. You are just banking on the touchdown. But we can see it happen again. The Bengals are going to be playing a lot from behind. Joe Flacco's a veteran who's not afraid to dump it off to his running backs. The Bengals are pretty banged up at tight end, so I don't mind P Ryan. And then Singletary is going to be the other guy getting work to replace Scadaboo for the Giants. Very serviceable, can still break one once in a while. I think it's going to be Tracy in the passing game is the primary option there out of the backfield. And the rushing attempts could be about a 50-50 split. I don't hate Singletary, but again, I think you're praying for a touchdown. Otherwise, you're probably in that 4 to 6 point range. So, maybe 5-ish% of your fab on these guys. And that's really not looking for a starter, not looking for a ton of upside. This is really if you were just looking for a fill in because you're in a bad spot at the running back position between the buys and or injuries. And then if you want to kind of fill out your bench, this is the time of year you need to be tucking the best handcuffs. As far as the top end handcuffs that are still out there in a lot of leagues, you have Tyler Algier, Bijan Robinson's handcuff of the Falcons owned at 36% of leagues. Brian Robinson Jr., the handcuff to Christian McCaffrey for the 49ers. He is owned at 24% of leagues. And then Blake Corum, the handcuff to Kyron Williams for the Rams, only owned in 8% of leagues. Those guys are pretty much locked in. You feel like they're going to return at least kind of low running back one, high end running back two value if the starter goes down. And then you have young handcuffs with upside. These guys would probably be in the running back two range with an injury, but they're also in a range where it's capable of getting a little bit more work even without an injury. You have Bashal Tutin of the Jaguars owned in 22% of leagues. Tank Bigsby now of the Eagles traded from the Jaguars owned in 19% of leagues. Again, on a bye, but keep an eye on that Saquon Barkley injury. Jaden Blue of the Cowboys, now the backup handcuff to Javonte Williams. With Miles Sanders out for the season, he is owned at 14% of leagues. Brashard Smith of the Chiefs gets a bump up here with the MCL injury for Pacheco. He is owned at 13% of leagues. We saw the career best game from Dolphins rookie running back Ollie Gordon II in week 8. They're trying to work him in more. He's only owned in 11% of leagues. Then we have Dylan Sampson of the Cleveland Browns. Again, keep an eye on that Judkins injury, owned in 10% of leagues. And then finally, a guy who showed out on Sunday Night Football, Emmanuel Wilson, now the clear-cut handcuff to Josh Jacobs in Green Bay, only owned in 4% of leagues. So tuck those guys on the bench if you can. Let's move on to the wide receiver position, starting with the injuries. And the big question we all have here, not what the hell happened to Drake London last week, but will we get Puka Nacua back this week? It sounds like we might. I think we could get Puka back as well as Nico Collins is in the concussion protocol. Calvin Ridley, Jacoby Myers, and Ricky Parasol, although it seems like Parasol's been, 1 week from returning for about 6 weeks. Keep an eye on Luther Burden III and Marvin Mims Jr. Both of those guys are in the concussion protocol. And Drake London, I mentioned him a second ago. He has a hip injury, wound up not playing last week. Sounds like he should play this week, but just keep an eye on him. Make sure you have a backup plan ready if necessary. One do-it-now player here, and that is the aforementioned Ricky Parasol, down to 73% ownership, so he's out there in 27% of ESPN leagues. Should step into a big role when he returns. I believe Brandon Ayuk is going to return when I see it. Right now, that 49ers offense is desperate for somebody to kind of step up there in the passing game, even with the return of George Kittle. So if Parasol returns, I am expecting big things. Two priority ads this week, two names we've already talked about. Troy Franklin of the Broncos, owned in 44% of leagues, has established himself as the clear-cut wide receiver 2 in Denver. And then Kayshon Boutte, one of Drake May's favorite targets in New England, only owned in 30% of leagues. We've seen it with Booty before. He is a little bit bobbish, a boom or bust player. The floor isn't great, but the ceiling is solid, and he really hasn't had as many bust weeks as you would think given his profile. So I like both of those guys, not going absolutely nuts, but both are worth somewhere between 10 and 20% of your fab. And then if you just want to speculate, guys, for 5% or less of your fab, once again, talking about Xavier Legette of the Panthers. Christian Watson of the Packers made his return. He's owned in 13% of leagues. Legette's owned in 33% of leagues. And then Darius Slayton also made his return for the Giants, owned in 11% of leagues. All of those players could potentially be streamers if needed. Aren't bad guys to tuck on the back of your bench, but they are players you could wind up cutting if somebody else better becomes available. So don't overcommit with your fab bids there. Again, keep it around 5% or so. It's an interesting choice of what to do in Tennessee. You have the rookie wide receivers, Chimere DK, owned in 5% of leagues, and Alec Manor owned in 25% of leagues. It does seem like DK has been coming on lately. There were some miscommunications between Manor and Ward, so I think I'm going to lean DK for now, despite the fact that Manor is owned in more leagues. But this is the Titans offense, so keep your fab bids to about 1 or 2% here. And then you have the Texans kind of mismatch of wide receivers behind Nico Collins and the injured Christian Kirk. You have Jaden Higgins owned in 22% of leagues, Xavier Hutchinson only owned in 2%, and Jalen Noel owned in 13%. Higgins is a guy I like best long term that has the capability, I think, to be maybe a consistent wide receiver too. But right now, he's been a little bit more of a possession guy and a touchdown dependent option, whereas Jalen Noel has shown more explosive ability, more big play capability. So I think right now in the season long format, I would go with Noel, but in Dynasty, I continue to prefer Jaden Higgins. Sunday of week 8 was National Tight End Day, and Tucker Kraft celebrated by having himself a barbecue and eating a big old 30 burger on Sunday Night Football. Again, the question is, will we be celebrating the return of Brock Bowers this week? I think we will be, but Pete Carroll's always been a little bit overly optimistic when it comes to injuries, so be a little bit cautious, but I am cautiously optimistic we will have Bowers back out there this week, and Cole Kmet could return for the Bears. Not a huge deal, but we saw Colston Loveland kind of take a step forward last week without Kmet. That process could continue if Kmet is out once again this week, so something to keep an eye on. Two do it now ads again, players owned in more than the 50% threshold, but less than 80% of ESPN leagues. We have the Chargers rookie tight end, smashed on Thursday Night Football last week. Oronde Gatz in the second, now owned in 68% of leagues, so he's still out there in 32% of leagues. If you need help at tight end or you think you could trade him to a team who does, I would probably be willing to go up to, yeah, probably 50% of my fab here. You might be able to get him for as low as 20, 25%, considering he's still out there. So perhaps he's just being overlooked, or teams in your league don't need tight ends or whatever. But for the most part, I'm going pretty heavily against it. And then you have another rookie tight end, Harold Fannin Jr. of the Cleveland Browns. He is owned in 55% of leagues, so just slightly over the threshold. I don't think he has quite the ceiling Gadsden has, just by nature of the offenses that they play in, but he's been remarkably consistent this season, and I feel confident that he can give you at least roughly 10 PPR points this, for the rest of the season here. And at the tight end position, if you don't have one of the best guys, I will take that, set it, and forget it. One priority ad, I continue to highlight Theo Johnson of the New York Giants, owned in 19% of leagues. Could even get a couple more looks with Scadaboo out here. He is a little bit touchdown dependent, but without Neighbors, that offense really has a big target vacuum. The defense is a great pass rush, but can get scored on at times. So I like Johnson's potential down the stretch to offer back end tight end one production. And then if you're going to pick a Steelers tight end this week, this is a tough one. You've got Rodgers against the Colts. Tough matchup. Feels like a Muth game. Going to go back to the Muth well here. I think it would have been Jonnu Smith if he would have caught the long pass that Rodgers missed him on last week. Darnell Washington wasn't targeted, so kind of not considering him here. His role seems to be more game plan specific, so going to go with the Muth as far as the Pittsburgh Steelers tight end who scores the most in Week 9. And then two streaming options for you at tight end. Once again, going with Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints, only owned in 33% of ESPN leagues. Saints are traveling to the Rams. Tough matchup here, but Tyler Shea, rookie quarterback, getting his first start for the Saints. Could see him leaning on his trusty tight end. So really like Juwan Johnson this week to have at least a nice high floor for you with a bit of ceiling if he can find the end zone. And then I mentioned him at the top, Colston Loveland. This is only a play if Cole Kmet is out. But if Kmet is out, I really love Loveland here, pun intended, only owned in 24% of ESPN leagues. Gets a phenomenal matchup at the Cincinnati Bengals against that defense. Should be a high scoring affair. So if Cole Kmet is out once again, I think you can go to Colston Loveland as a streaming option in week 9.
Are you in there, baby? Yeah. Starting defense. Place at the table.
Cash rules everything around the Wu-Tang Clan. And in fantasy football, offense generally rules everything, but we feel strongly that the defense and special teams units deserve a place at the table. We have a couple of DST streaming options for you here in week 9, starting with the Los Angeles teams. The Los Angeles Chargers, owned in 41% of ESPN leagues, are traveling to face the Tennessee Titans in one of the best possible matchups for a fantasy defense. They're also got the mini bye here as they played on Thursday Night Football. Just got Khalil Mack back, so things are looking up for the Chargers DST. And then we have the Rams DST. They're staying home to face the Saints. The Rams are just straight up coming off of the bye week here, so they are extra rested, owned in 36% of leagues, facing a rookie quarterback making his first start. So you know that Rams defensive line is licking their chops. They are an excellent play both this week and going forward. And you could say the same thing about the Baltimore Ravens, now down to only 29% ownership in ESPN fantasy leagues. They are playing on Thursday Night Football, traveling to face the Dolphins, who have been extremely Jekyll and Hyde this season. I think there is a strong probability that Ravens defense can turn Tua over a couple times, get to him a couple of times here, really set themselves up for a strong run down the stretch. They have one of the better upcoming schedules for a fantasy DST, and I think people are really scared to go back to the well given how bad they were to start the season. I don't think they're going to be as good as we would have hoped coming in. They're not going to meet those expectations, but they are getting quite a bit healthier, and that was a great deal of the problem they had on defense was the injuries. So I have faith that they can turn it around here. Nice DST to add on the cheap. I don't think they'll cost nearly as much as the Chargers or the Rams. I would probably prioritize the Rams, then the Ravens, then the Chargers if I had to rank them. The Chargers and the Rams probably worth, yeah, I would say the Rams and the Ravens are worth probably at 10-ish% of your fab, whereas I'd probably keep it to around more like 5 to 7% for the Chargers here, although they could also offer a little bit of streaming capability further down the road. I think that does it for the Week 9 waiver wire recommendations. Did we miss anybody? Any questions on how much to bid? Any of that good stuff? Hit us up on social media. Drop it in the comments. Thanks again for checking out Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. Find our content wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, on social media at Seize the Gap FF, and on the web at seizethegapff.com. Simple, easy to remember, just like the flaps, FLAPS. Very crucial to our success. Follow, like, and please subscribe. If you had fun, please touch the thumb. I'm Magnum Mills, and although I'm riding solo on behalf of myself and Jamie G, we want to remind you to seize the gap and stop being so inefficient. We don't care if you're old, you need to seize the gap.
It's the big day, rally with the guards, cars parked up in the driveway, in the trenches where the suspense is. Gotta make a few stops, get some G's from the pit stop. Bill with the Gary, he's on the block, we did our bid together in the 6 building. Smoke G's direct time to keep our minds filled in. Spoke to Killer Sin on the bad phone, want me to scoop him right quick before we zone.